Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bolton of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out newdealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about. Today, I talk with Newport, Rhode Island City Council member Xay Khamsyvoravong. He has an extraordinary story. He's a son of a refugee from Laos. He was a competitive ice skater, then became an attorney and a public finance expert. He and his very long name ran for city council and was elected. He served as his iconic city's mayor, led resilience efforts, engaged his community to improve attendance in schools, and used his knowledge of public finance to improve his water system and save ratepayers money. We talked about all those things, plus the impact of the Trump administration on his community and his hobby of frostbite sailing. Enjoy. Newport City Council member Xay Khamsyvoravong, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thank you for having me on.
I want to start with, you've had a long experience in a variety of public service roles, but your background's in finance. And I feel like progressives, the Democratic Party, don't spend enough time thinking about how we can use finance to improve the lives of our constituents and the country. What do we need to know and understand about finance if we're trying to build a better community or a better country?
We are experiencing this in real time with all the federal decisions being made recently, that you got to follow the money. And if you want to understand whether government is serious about the things that they're saying, you need to see if they're putting their money where their mouth is. Understanding how money flows through to impact public policy is the crux of what ensures that the work we're doing actually follows through and has the impact that we're intending it to have. That's why when I started my career in the state treasurer's office, I decided that I wanted to be an expert on public finances. I wanted to understand how the money flowed better than even the bankers sitting across the table. And so I went and did that work for the past several decades, focusing specifically on public finance and the decisions the government makes and how money impacts those decisions.
And I know you have a long career working in water policy and other things. Can you talk about some of the successes of where you brought that knowledge to bear and how it could impact your community or your state?
You have to figure out how to pay for these great ideas that we have every single day. And you have to find a way for it to be sustainable. Sustainable in the sense that there will continue to be money for these important initiatives that we undertake in a way that actually continues to advance and expand the realm of possibility and opportunity for people who live in our communities. When I chaired the water utility, we effectively were able to maintain one of the lowest rates within the state while also substantially modernizing that utility. That includes doing things like figuring out how to move entirely to renewable energy generated on our watershed, which not only made us more green, consistent with our message and objective, but also ensured that the utility was rate neutral at the end of the day, meaning that we were actually making money off the electricity we were generating rather than continue to spend money. That was good for the bottom line of our ratepayers. It was good for our communities, and it allowed us to have funds to invest in a range of other important policy priorities to improve the quality of our drinking water.
Do you have advice for maybe someone who doesn't have a background in finance, but finds themselves in an advisory body or in government or as an activist and wants to ensure water remains or other utilities remain affordable to their community? How should they approach it when they're sitting across the desk from bankers and trying to figure out how to fund these great ideas?
Don't be afraid to ask questions, to make sure that you understand the decisions that you're making when you're making them. Take as much time as you need to do that. And if you don't understand, reach out and find a resource that you can. My day work is as a municipal advisor, where I advise communities and community leaders on the impact of the decisions they're making to ensure they understand what it is that they're deciding on when it's put in front of them. There are plenty of people who want to help you with that, but nothing is a replacement for you yourself gaining that knowledge and skill set. I cared a lot about public policy making, which is why I went and got my master's in public affairs and public policy. Moving off that, I realized that understanding how the law functions and how the law works is really important, which is why I'm also a licensed attorney. Similarly, on the financial end, we need to be as focused on being experts when it comes to finances as many of us are in the public policy and the legal realm.
And can you talk a little bit about from that expertise, what is the impact of the disruptions we're seeing at the federal level, potential tariffs, inflationary pressures being put on? Like what do you see as the future of public finance with this significant disruptions that we're facing and seemingly well into the future?
It is going to be an increased importance of local and state government to protect the things that we rely on and care about every single day. We just had the benefit of an unprecedented investment, both in our infrastructure and the resiliency initiatives for our communities through the president's multiple package that he put forth in a bipartisan manner. Now, unfortunately, we have to be prepared to figure out how we close the gap that could be left if some of those funds are pulled back at the local level. That's going to require being innovative about the ways that we go about funding our infrastructure. Let me give you one example of how we're pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps here in Newport. Our little city has a $115 million annual budget, but our capital needs we have just to cope with the resiliency challenges we're facing are almost $500 million. Now, we worked under the last administration to bring in over $50 million in state and federal funding, but we needed obviously substantially more, so we issued a bond. A good portion of the bond that we issued is being repaid through a fee that our community collects on cruise ship visitors that come to Newport. We substantially increased that fee to help us pay for a lot of the waterfront improvements we need to ensure that we continue to be an attractive destination for people who visit and a great place to live for residents who are here year-round.
And tell us about Newport. I mean, I've been there. It's one of the most beautiful, amazing cities in the country, but it's right on the water, and so it faces challenges from sea level rise and other impacts. So tell us about your community, and then tell us about some of the challenges it's facing.
Sure. Well, first let's start and take it back. Let's take it way back to Newport's importance to our country as a whole. Newport is the home of religious independence, right? Rhode Island is essentially a collection of castaways who moved out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony during the colonial era to focus on the importance of religious independence. But it is specifically Newport itself that took a stand in the founding documents of our country and insisted on religious independence being a core governing value for our country. Now, moving past that, Newport has gone through a lot of different ebbs and flows throughout history, and today has a year-round population of about 24,000 people. What's extraordinary is that we have over 3.5 million people a year who visit our community, whether it is as tourists, whether it's nearly 20,000 individuals who pass through the U.S. Naval War College based in Newport, or whether it's here to come here to sail and race and enjoy the incredible community that we have from a cultural and sports perspective. So we're a small coastal vacation community that has a huge surge in visitors that come here every single year. Now, the demand that is placed on our community by those visitors, combined with the pressures that we face as a coastal community dealing with being on the front lines of climate change, requires an incredible amount of investment, not only in our infrastructure, but in our people to ensure that we are prepared to continue handling the future. That's where I focused most of my work.
And the community, I mean, it's a fascinating community in that you have billionaires and you have people who are working people in the visitor serving or fishing industries. And so how does everyone coexist in your community, and how do you represent that wide variety of the socioeconomic spectrum?
Well, you work hard and you lean into it and you make sure that every part of the community feels your presence, that you are there and accessible and sincere and understanding and hearing what they have to say. That's not always easy, but it is a crucial part of what it means to be effective at the local level. There's nowhere to run and hide to. I do not go out to get a coffee or stop at the supermarket without somebody stopping me saying, hey, I'm really sorry to bother you. I know you're not in the office right now, but, and they hit you with whatever the question is. But it's really important to try and balance the entirety of that ecosystem and to resist the urge that you see in many places where making public policy decisions becomes an us versus them. This isn't to say that we make hard decisions every day that inevitably don't make somebody happy. That's okay. That's part of the job, and that's why we're in this role. But you have to work very hard to ensure that whatever decision you're making is truly advancing the bottom line for the community and helping to improve the quality of life for everybody that's here.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in this role? You served as your community's mayor. We've talked about some of your educational background, but tell us how you and your family found yourself in Newport.
Well, public service and community engagement has been a through line throughout my entire life. It is a core value that was instilled to me as a child growing up. My father was a refugee to this country from Laos. My mother was a community health practitioner. And so serving in the community that gave us a lot of opportunity has been a core part of who I am. And so whether it has been volunteering on boards for nonprofits and community organizations, chairing the state's largest drinking water utility, or running for office and serving locally, these are all things that are consistent reflections of the commitment I've always had in my life to community service. And that's also because I enjoy it. This is work that I find rewarding. It is difficult, it is challenging, but at the end of the day, it makes a difference, and I enjoy it. So I'm constantly thinking about ways to be more impactful in the things I'm doing. I never thought, with such an unusual name, that having my name on a ballot would be something that was possible, never mind palatable, that people would actually vote for, but was blown away by the reception that I had here in Newport. The first time I ran, I did it the same way that most people run for office. I got out and I knocked on doors, and I walked every single street in the city, and I spent a lot of time not telling voters what it was that I cared about, but listening to what voters cared about. And the end result in the election was an unprecedented margin of victory in that race as a first-time candidate with a name that nobody could pronounce. That was a reflection of a community that I think really felt the value of being heard and really cared about ensuring that the future reflected the changes that are necessary for this community to continue to be a great place to live and work.
Yeah, I wondered if you had to have larger lawn signs, pay extra for printing.
I had a reporter ask recently, I said, why do you spend so much time, focused on the fundraising aspect, which as candidates is the worst part of the job, right? And I was like, well, they charge you by the name by the letter on these lawn signs. So, you got to make sure you have the funds to run. The fundraising is an unfortunate part of running for office for most of us, particularly in places like Rhode Island, where the matching public funds programs don't kick in until you run statewide. And so it is an important exercise to undertake, particularly if you're a candidate who needs to push to get your name out so voters understand and recognize who you are.
Yeah. I mean, what's your advice for someone who's thinking about running? They may have an unusual name or a background, a non-traditional background, and they want to connect with people in their community. What's your advice from the very tactical of you got to raise some money to running the campaign itself?
You have to be methodical about what you're doing, and you have to be intentional. Just like going to the gym or preparing for a big test, you need to make sure that you are very disciplined in getting out, knocking on doors, and reaching out to raise money. Raising money isn't just about raising funds so you can communicate out your message. The actual act of raising money requires you to put yourself out there and to listen to people and to help build the network that you have that ultimately helps you get elected. The second part is to listen. As Democrats, we spend a lot of time talking. And while we may talk an awful lot, oftentimes we're finding we're not actually saying all that much. It's way more effective to listen to what voters are saying, to make sure that they understand that you care about the issues that they are articulating to you, and to work really hard to find solutions on the things that they indicate to you are important.
And what's been the difference between working on statewide efforts or for agencies and representing a small coastal community and the decisions you have to make as mayor or on council?
Well, a couple things. First, the response loop is almost immediate. If I make a decision and people don't like it, I hear about that almost minutes after I make that decision. And I can see the impact of that decision in real time, usually within a matter of days or weeks, not in a matter of years. At the state level, you don't quite have the same immediacy and response loop that you have at the local level. And so it can be very challenging to ensure that the decisions you're making are the right decisions. The nice thing at the local level, though, is that as long as you lead boldly and with intention, People are relatively forgiving when you make mistakes, as long as you're honest about the fact that you're not always going to get it right, and that we're doing the best we can to find the best possible solution to move forward on everything from sewer fees to housing to education policy. We have to be bold. We have to work hard to find the right solutions. And then we need to be very intentional about how we're communicating that to voters and how we're ensuring that the decisions we make reflect the things that they are telling us.
Yeah, tell us, making a decision in a city of 24,000 people that is unpopular, or even making a mistake in a city of that size, is tough because it's a small community and you are going to hear about it in the aisles of the supermarket. How do you mentally prepare yourself to make decisions that might not be popular with a neighborhood, a constituent, a neighbor, and you're going to have a long-term relationship with these folks in your community?
First of all, I believe that if you want to be popular and you want to be well-liked based on the decisions you're making, elected office is not right for you. You have to have relatively thick skin in receiving the feedback that you receive from people, but you also actually need to listen to that feedback. It can be very easy and very tempting to put up a wall, saying, "Oh, look, I worked hard on this decision. It's the best thought out policy we've had, and gosh darn it, it's the right thing to do, and so I'm standing for it." But you need to be self-critical, to step back and ask yourself if the decisions you're making actually are the right decisions and how you can make them better moving forward. If somebody is taking the time to write an email to you or to reach out to you or to even stop and talk to you about a policy issue, it means that they care. And we're dealing with a level of apathy from voters right now that really is concerning in terms of the health of our democracy. And so even when it's things that you don't want to hear, you have to be willing to listen to it squarely head on and to actually listen to what people are telling you. The mistakes we make in government oftentimes are not actually listening to the feedback that people are trying to give us because they care.
And what do you think is the mood of your community in this national moment of frustration, anger, and now I think you're right, growing apathy, where people are just sort of tuning out because it's so overwhelming?
Yeah, what's challenging is that American communities are remarkably resilient in times of crises. If you want a good example of this, look at how well many of our local communities navigated COVID. These were really contentious times and they were very challenging issues, but what you found wasn't that government rode in and saved the day. It was that at the state and local level, a combination of local government, but more specifically, community organizations came together to make sure we got through that really challenging time. What we need to work on, what we need our democracy to do better, is to take that same sense of community camaraderie and actually focus it on how we serve problems that we are struggling with on a sustained basis. So I'm talking about things like infrastructure, education policy, housing. These are crises that are long and drawn out. They're not going to pass quickly. The bug is not just going to go away. These are problems that are with us until we solve and fix them. And so we need to take that same esprit de corps that we had through crises and figure out how to apply it on a sustained basis that helps our communities rise to the moment.
Do you have any examples of where that's worked in your community, or where you've been able to keep people connected even through fractious, difficult moments?
American education is at a turning point right now. I look at our American education system, and with very few examples do I feel that students today are getting the same level of opportunity that I did just a few decades ago. And so we need to focus on what we need to do to retool our education system to meet the moment that we're in today. Public school looks nothing like it did back when we were in school. Let me give you some examples of that. In Newport, again, this is a community you may recognize from vacation. Maybe you came here for a wedding one time or the Gilded Age, but it takes a lot to make this entire operation run. And so our school population reflects what it takes to make a community like this run. What does that mean? That means for 2/3 of the students who are in our classrooms every day, the primary meal they're receiving is the free one that they get when they come into school each day. That means that over half of our students are coming from single-parent households. 1/3 of our students are coming from households where English is not the primary language. And so to expect that a traditional school system and a traditional school day is going to help give those students the same opportunity that we all had when we were in school is just not realistic. And so in Newport, we set about building an education system that intentionally integrated our community partners in the work that schools are doing. So specifically, we focused on elementary school students in grades K through 4, a cohort of about 160 in our community. And we took the work that the after-school programs were doing, and we integrated throughout it the same curriculum, the same professional training, and the same data that teachers in the classroom are using to teach students things like reading and math. And the outcome was extraordinary. We've got a community where about a third of our students are chronically absent at the elementary school level, about half of our students at the high school level. 70% of our participants in these after-school programs showed an improvement in their attendance rates in our school system. 80% of the students who participated in these after-school programs showed substantial improvement in their reading and math skills. These are notable improvements. What they reflect is the power of aligning with intentionality the community work that's being done outside the classroom with what's going on in the classroom to have an intentional education system.
That is some extraordinary statistics and change. I have two questions. One is, like, what did you do to engage those students to get them back into school and reduce absenteeism? And two, are the policies of the Trump administration having an impact on your immigrant population and their willingness to come to schools or engage in community programs?
Yeah, I'll start with the first part in the beginning and then move to the second question. Within our public school system, what we found is that we needed to create a continuity of adults who all leaned in on how important attendance was and how exciting school is. And so that means all those adults talking to each other. So as part of that after-school program, we paid teachers extra to come in and serve as site liaisons with the after-school programs, whether it was at the Boys and Girls Club or a local food entity or the existing after-school programs, to make sure that students saw this is a uniform network of adults who care about me and care that I'm in school. And so I better show up every single day because they're counting on me to show up. Second, it was ensuring that we didn't forget about the fun. Our first iteration of this, we focused very rigidly on the curriculum that was being used, the science of reading. And what we found is that students were giving us feedback that, listen, we just came out of the pandemic. We want to play. We're already having a hard time self-regulating through a school day. You really want us to do more homework when we get out. We realized that play is a really important part of learning. And so we started integrating into our curriculums aspects of play that students enjoyed. What we found now is that the students are as excited about the time they spend reading in their after-school programs as they are about going out and running around the play yard. That to us indicates that we're doing things right. And it's reflected in the metrics of the attendance numbers that we're seeing, but it's also reflected in the attitude and the feedback that we're getting from students and parents that learning is fun again and it is part of what they live for and care about every single day. On the issue of immigration, which is challenging, roughly 15% of Newport's population are immigrants who are here from primarily Spanish-speaking countries. These are the individuals who quite literally are behind the scenes making sure that this tourism machine that has 3.5 million visitors a year works. What's been important to us is getting the facts out about the situations that we have with regards to immigration and how our community works to address the sense of self and place that everybody has here who lives here and makes this community work. And so a few weeks ago, we had a situation where there was an arrest in our community, and very quickly word got out that this was an immigration raid, and it caused this pullback, right? We had students that were afraid to get on school buses. And so adults actually got out there, for teachers and administrators in our schools, and drove students home personally, reassured them that our community's focus was ensuring that they were safe, that they had opportunities to learn, and they continue to feel like valuable parts of our community, but also that we were factual about the situation that we have coming out of Washington right now, the steps that are being taken, and how our community is working through these difficult times.
Wow. And I mean, how does it feel personally to see this rise in xenophobia and pull back from the world as somebody whose family experienced firsthand, a welcoming country that tried to create opportunity?
Let me tell you, between my two elections, from my first election when I ran going door to door and my second, I noticed a notable and palatable uptick in xenophobia. And it was right there in my face. And it's not one of those things that I've talked about particularly frequently, but it's tough. It's tough feeling that and seeing that when I don't believe that that is how most people actually feel. What's important, though, is to listen, is to actually listen and to think about what is driving this sense of instability that people are feeling that is causing them to feel like they need to lash out, like they can be emboldened to lash out. I think those that reflect the racism that we see highlighted and splashed out there is a minority of the people in our community, less than 1% even, right? But it's real, and we need to address it head on. We need to reaffirm our commitment to this being a welcoming country, to this being welcoming communities, where our diversity is part of our core strength. That's what I hear every single day when I talk to residents in our community, is that continuous reaffirmation that they want to be part of supporting the next generation of the American dream. And I'm very proud to represent a community that is so rooted in those values.
And what's next for Newport as with the chaos at the federal level? And you want to create this welcoming, close-knit community that's committed to opportunity. How are you going to do that in the with the big macro trends that are pushing us apart?
We're an island down here in Newport, but I don't think that the mentality we have is one that's terribly separate from what every community needs to take on, which is we have a challenge in front of us. And despite the fact that the tide might be running against us right now, we still need to figure out how to get from A to B. I'm a sailor, and so I'm very used to the winds not being favorable to me, to the tide not being quite right. But you have to figure out how to move forward consistently. That's where it takes smart people stepping in and being willing to serve in government when it's not comfortable. This is not easy work. You should not take on this work, like I said earlier, if your primary objective is being popular, being able to do fun things. If you're willing to roll up your sleeves and to work hard to find solutions, government is the place for you, and we need help now. I'll give you an example of a pretty serious change we made with a focus on ensuring that this community is able to help pick itself up from its bootstraps to move forward. And that's on the issue of resiliency. We are an island community on the front lines of climate change. And so whether it's dealing with flooding in our communities, both on the low-lying areas where you have sea level rise impacting us, or at the higher elevations, where just per nature of being a city that is densely populated, we have severe stormwater challenges. Or looking at things like some of our beaches, which not only serve as an important amenity and part of our community identity, but also serve as the barrier between the Atlantic Ocean and our public drinking water supply. We need to move urgently to protect these assets, to protect our neighborhoods, and to ensure that this community is one that is here in the long term. And so what we did is reorganize city government. In a lot of cities in America, they have a resilience and sustainability director. And this tends to look a bit more like a policy position, somebody that helps put together reports, maybe pursues grants. We felt very strongly that this needed to be more than just a one-off addition to the team. This had to be a core central part of our team and a core central tenet with how we make decisions. And so we took our city government and we reorganized it into three major departments. The first is administration and finance. The second is public safety, and the third is resiliency and sustainability. And in that final department is any part of the city that has anything to do with building anything in the city, ensuring that when we build things in the future, whether it is a new roadway or utility line, whether it's a new housing development, that is being done with an eye towards, is this something that we're going to be able to continue supporting for the next several generations? That's a fundamental change in the mindset that we have in terms of how government goes out and addresses problems. And I'm proud of the work that we're doing here.
And has it changed how some of these projects are developed or even done in the first place?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is impacting right now. We're going through zoning changes, and we're looking at how a lot of those decisions are getting made, including looking at things like permeable surfaces, right? For example, it's always exciting to see a new home getting constructed in the neighborhood because we know that housing is a priority, but we need to think really carefully about what happens to your neighbor down the street if you have a yard that's hardscaped, or you build out that building footprint so there's very little lawn area to help absorb the rainwater that's coming down. So every decision, whether it's investing in better stormwater infrastructure or thinking about things like our building and zoning codes, all add up to impacting the quality of life that people have here every day on challenges like resiliency.
Makes a ton of sense. You mentioned sailing, and this is my last question. I wanted to sort of dive in. I saw that you competitively sail during the winter, which seems crazy, and year round. You are, as you mentioned, an attorney. You're on a local council. You're in a variety of statewide leadership roles. How do you think about how you allocate your time? How do you find time to sail in freezing miserable conditions? How do you think about that going forward in the future?
You just have to do it. The first thing you do is you have to have agency. You have to work very intentionally on thinking about what it is that you need personally to stay in balance. And the beautiful thing about frostbite sailing is there are not a lot of people who are going to come out in February to bother me while I'm in a 12-foot boat in the middle of the harbor. And that's a gift. But you have to think about how you intentionally put yourself in places to give yourself the space and the mindset you need to rebalance. Look, I think that everybody right now is dealing with a lot of challenges. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. Life is stressful right now. And I think everybody needs to be thinking very carefully about what are those things that I do well, that I care about, that make me fulfilled as an individual. And so whether that is sailing or knitting or reading a book or being in a fantasy sports league, it's really important to take some time to invest in yourself to make sure you have that sense of balance, because that will make you more empathetic. It'll make you more effective. It'll ensure that we're moving towards better communities for the future. And that's the only way that's going to happen, is if we each take on that individual responsibility.
I love it. I mean, I'm not sure I love frostbite sailing, but I love the rest of it. And so I want to thank you for being part of New Deal and the work you're doing. I think, as I mentioned, when we first were getting to know each other, I do feel like Santa Cruz and Newport are sister communities in that we're both on water and try to welcome tourists and support our hospitality. And I find a lot of the work you're doing inspiring for not just all New Deal leaders, but specifically for my community. And so thank you.
Well, thanks for having me on, and let's make a deal. How about you come out here to Newport to come sailing one day, and it doesn't have to be in the winter, and I'll make a trip out to Santa Cruz at some point soon. Thanks so much for having me.
Perfect. Summer only. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at New Deal for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group.